Hey, this is Zachlog the Great, and I am here again tonight with my friend Nate.
Hello.
And also with my friend Travis.
Hello.
And we are getting together tonight to talk about Ted Hughes' poem, October Dawn, which Nate has volunteered to read for us. Before we get to that, however, I did want to say quickly, if you like my channel, if you like my work and you want to support my work, you can go to subscribestar.com/Zachlog-the-great, and you can sign up there to support my channel between $1 and $5 a month. And I also wanted to say thank you to my supporter Ann H, who was the one who originally suggested this poem. If you don't like it, go yell at her. So, having said that, Nate has volunteered to read the poem for us tonight, so I'm going to get that up on the screen, and hopefully once he's done, I'm going to get it back down off of the screen this time, and we will talk about that. Here, wait one moment. Ding. Okay. Thought I had things sorted out, which I did not. There we go. Okay, go. When you're ready.
All right. October Dawn. Ted Hughes. October is marigold, and yet a glass half full of wine left out. To the dark night by dawn has dreamed a premonition of ice across its eye, as if the ice age had begun its heave. The lawn overtrodden and strewn from the night before, and the whistling green shrubbery are doomed. Ice has got its spearhead into place. First a skin, delicately here, restraining a ripple from the air. Soon plate and river on tons of chain and massive lock to hold rivers. Then, bound by sight, will mammoth and saber-tooth celebrate. Reunion, fist of cold, squeezes the fire at the core of the world, squeezes the fire at the core of the heart, and now it is about to start.
Okay. Stop sharing. Hey, I remembered this time. And I also didn't have any goofy pictures of Horatius with a weird mustache up on the screen half the time. Anyway,
Mustache.
Travis.
Yes.
Would you like to start us off with your first thoughts about this tonight?
I think it's interesting that it's, October dawn. Theoretically, it's about October and autumn, but it feels much more like a winter poem than an autumn poem. Being all about ice, really. I don't know. I like the premonition, of the skin of ice on the wide bottle. I'll hand it over to someone else at that point.
Okay, I will put something else up on the screen very quickly, because it just seems a little too appropriate.
I was like, there are a lot of ways to say winter coming. But,
so yeah, so it's not saying winter is here. He's saying winter is coming. It's on the way. It's a premonition of winter.
But he's saying it's on the way, but everything he's saying is kind of like it's here. I don't know. There's a fine line there, I feel like.
Well, also, like he said, like October is marigold. It's, kind of warm. You think warm, sunny. But there's this indication there's this there was a glass half full of wine, and when I got it this morning, there was ice across the top. And it wasn't just it wasn't just water, it was wine, which is gonna be a little bit more it's gonna take a little bit more to actually get that frosted. And so he's like, it's still warm, but there's this kind of implicit threat. Is kind of what I'm is kind of my overall read of the poem.
Well, and I think even the glass half full is an interesting note. From the whole optimism, pessimism sort of thing. So you can you can say that it's a good time or a bad time, I suppose. October. If you like winter, then it's a good time. If you miss summer, then it's a bad time.
October.
What's that?
Dude, I freaking like October, man. Like it's the first time of the year that we get halfway decent weather most of the time. So, hey,
well,
it's been 95 degrees for 7 months straight. And then finally, just all of a sudden in October, it's like, ugh. And weather's like, here, fine, you can have the 70s for 2 weeks.
Yes.
The October he's talking about is not the October experienced in this part of the country. One interesting thing I noticed about this poem, and it actually took me a little while I was memorizing it to realize this, but the entire thing is, or almost the entire thing, is written in like half rhyme or off rhyme. And it took me a little bit to catch on to that because it's kind of subtle. But like, having written some myself, like I've noticed that if you handle it right, like off rhyme can be like interesting and unsettling. Because you kind of want to shove it. You kind of want to like. There's a little part of your brain that wants to shove it and fit it into place, but it just doesn't. And so, like, if you look at the couplets most of the way through, yet and out, dawn and premonition, if and heave, strewn and green, ice and place, and like the whole way through, it almost rhymes but doesn't quite. Which is, like I said, if you do that right, that can be an interesting tool.
No, you're right, and I do find that very interesting because it starts with these sort of like further apart rhymes, I feel like, and as it moves toward talking about like the final grip of ice where it hits the the perfect rhyme, I feel like they move closer and closer together as it gets colder. So it's kind of like energetic, sort of scattered fall time, falling in, crystallizing, bam, structure, and it's all frozen.
I had not noticed that, but yes, that is a progression here, because and that's also probably part of the reason I didn't notice it at first, because it starts with a real stretch, and then like by the last two lines it is a direct rhyme, and for the ones before that it's like much closer. So yes, it's not just off rhyme, it's a definite progression, which there's I don't like it when, like, to just understand what something means at all, you have to, like, dig and do all this research and, like, oh, what does this word mean in, 12th century Urdu? And I feel like some writers do that. But I do like it when, like, you can read it and you can get something just at a very basic level, but then if you dig, you start pulling out more and more. And I think that's a really great way to write anything, okay? Especially poems. And so, yeah, that's fascinating.
I've done my bit.
But yeah, but I don't think. Okay, to me, this is not a poem celebrating winter. Like everything he says about it is, or seems, pretty threatening or foreboding. The lawn and the shrubbery are doomed. Ice has a spearhead. The mammoth and the saber tooth are gonna come back and dance all over your head. And it's very it's not a happy thing, and it's
I feel like this guy was probably anemic. He's just cold all the
or has seasonal affective disorder is another possibility.
Like that. No, I totally agree. This thing is very much not looking to this guy, Ted Hughes. The winter is something to be survived, not partaken of. You feel like he's like, sitting on like a mountainside in Montana going, oh no, I gotta go buy more beans.
Well, and
back up the mountain, the passes will be snowed closed.
Let's see. Where did he live? Born in England. Okay, so England. Okay, so apparently he was born and died in England, and I'm assuming he was there most of the time in between. And I mean that's maybe a bad assumption, but anyway. To me, and I realize there are parts of the world where this isn't probably true. But to me, hot weather can kill you. Okay, I'm aware of that. Hot weather definitely can kill you. Where I am right now, that's probably rather more of a danger. But cold weather, seriously cold weather, up where I'm from, it wants you dead. It's not, it might do it by accident. It's trying to. Just the feel of, sub-zero Fahrenheit temperatures, you go outside, you're like, this wants me dead. In a way that 100 degrees, 105 degrees, Fahrenheit, it could kill you, yes, but it doesn't seem personal in the same way. I don't know, Travis.
You have to work with the heat to kill you, man. The cold will do it all of its own.
Right.
You're in England, apparently, because they die in 80-degree weather, which is.
I guess it somewhat depends on the. I don't know. I'm not a big fan of hot and humid, but
I'm not saying I'm a fan. I'm just saying hot weather, right. Like I said, hot weather can kill you. But it doesn't seem very much personification here. Cold wants you dead in a way that the heat doesn't.
Well, I think he points to that when he says, reunion while a fist of cold squeezes the fire at the core of the world, squeezes the fire at the core of the heart. I mean, yes, it feels like it wants to kill you. And if you don't have a warm place to go, if you can't get heat, it's going to eventually kill you, and it breaks you down, and makes you weak, makes you more vulnerable to illness, defeats your immune system. I don't know. I've been reading a book called Citizen Soldiers about World War II, and the European theater, and they had to, they went through winter and cold, and the cold added a whole other factor of hardship to them. Although I've heard that most soldiers would prefer to have been in Europe than to be in the South Pacific with the heat? So it's an interesting question.
I remember listening to Dan Carlin. I think he was talking about. I don't remember at this moment whether he was talking about World War I or World War II, but he described this theater of war and this theater of war, and he said none of them are a place you want to be, but it seems like there's a everyone has a personal hell that would be worse for that particular person than someone than some other location. So for some people, you know you're a soldier in World War II. That's already not fantastic. But by the way, we're dropping you in the jungles of the Philippines. Have fun. He's like, oh, no, 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 no. Anywhere? Is there literally anywhere else you could please put me? And then, some people, what's the name of the place?
Would be nice.
There was a field in World War. There was a field in there was a battle in World War I where the entire field of battle was just this mass of mud. Not just mud that could suck an entire man down, and you could die smothering in the mud. And I can't remember the name of it. Starts with P-L. Passchendaele, that was it.
Oh, yeah.
And so for some people, that's worse than the jungle. But and so everyone has their own, which way, which one is a little more scary to them. I think to Europeans, winter is the one that tends to scare us more.
I don't know. If it's the jungle, I don't want to go. Everything in the jungle wants to kill you. For the most part.
Yeah.
Lots of disease and malaria and all kinds of other crazy fun stuff, which, granted, it may be cold, but that stuff's not there trying to kill you as much.
So you don't often hear the phrase pestilential tundra.
Yeah. Although they say that diseases are coming back out of the tundra because they're thawing out, like old diseases. I don't know what the story is there, but I've heard that.
Diseases in honor, maybe?
What's that?
No, I read this poem and I'm like, I was like, it reminds me of something. It was tickling my brain, and then I was like, oh yeah, my favorite guy, and probably my most moody poem I've ever loved, which is "My November Guest" by Robert Frost. And he's sort of thinking about the change of season as well, a little bit further along, but he very much is more on the camp of this is great. Because he talks about how everything's desolate and bare and gray and getting cold, and he's like, it's nice. But of course, the first line of that poem is "My sorrow when she is here with me." So I'm like, well, okay. Very moody poem, but I was a moody kid when I first ran into it. I was like, this is great.
Robert Frost's teenage goth phase. We definitely should cover his poem "Storm Fear," which is also about winter trying to kill you. So
I wrote a poem on the front of one of my Western paperbacks because I was working at a local park one summer, and I'm sitting there on this golf cart watching people not break, park regulations, and kind of read back. And I look up and I can see it's like a big summer thunderhead coming. I'm like, that's gonna hit us in about, and then a big old gust of wind came out from under, like, whoosh, and just kind of rushed past. And I was like, 20 minutes, just gonna go from dusty, scorching hot to pelting down rain quick. And it kind of reminded me of like, it's sort of that experience, sort of this poem on fast forward, because you're like, oh yeah, hey, there's a cloud over there. Holy moly, that's a wind, and that wind is very moist. You can smell the rain on that wind. And then darkness settles in like God snuffed out the sun, and then it's just lightning and you can't see. It is awesome. Love being under one of them big thunder boomers. But the feeling is this, just with less immediacy.
Well, and what's interesting, I mean, like you were mentioning, the difference in location, place, being here in Montana. I mean, like we could have snowstorms in the beginning of October. I mean, we have well, I went and did an Eskimo swim on the last day of September one time while it was snowing. So October is more like September here. But you never really know when it's going to hit, and whenever, like I call it my favorite day of the year, whenever there's snow in the hills for the first time. You walk out the building and, you can see the snow in the hills. And that happens in September. I mean, that can happen in the middle of September, or it can be the middle of October.
That is, and that also, like, it's not in, well, I guess it's a little bit in this poem, but like that is, something else about like actual serious winter. Like snowfall changes like the entire outside world very rapidly, like in a way like nothing else really does. Like, I mean, I guess a flood, not even a flood. No. Well, I mean, but like literally everything, if you go to bed and there's like, a solid snowfall overnight and you come out, like the entire world suddenly looks different. And it's a pretty remarkable thing, and kind of a little bit miss it, but pluses and minuses.
No, I mean, you're absolutely right. When I was up in Virginia, I mean, one of my most distinct memories is me and Rachel laying on the couch in our living room watching. I said, there's a street light basically right outside the window across the front yard. So the only thing you see outside is like the corner of a shrub, the orb of light from the street light, and watching snow enter on one side and without dropping a bit, head out the other side. And it's 3 feet that night. It is nice to have a house. Like I cannot some poor cave monkey who's being like, so cold. Go.
Well, and that, I mean, that is the thing when you have winter climb. Like it's a very real thing to be getting ready for winter. I mean, whether cold in fact actually wants to kill you or not, if you don't prepare for it, it will kill you. Yeah.
Well, and I guess that's also like part of the difference between, very hot climates and, cold climates like he is talking about here. Because like, heat is a problem, but as long as you have water, you're probably like, there's not too much else you really need to do. In fact, probably the best thing to do is not much of anything. Whereas, severe cold, cold winters, like if you're not planning for this ahead of time, you are going to have problems. The ant and the grasshopper, kind of story. I do find it kind of annoying that in most modern renditions of that, by the way, like the ants are like, oh, we should help the grasshopper. And it's like, well, that kind of undercuts the moral of the entire story. It's like, be an idiot, waste your time, don't do anything to prepare, and some other nice people will help you anyways. It's like, okay, that sounds fine to me. I'm
unfamiliar with this story.
The ant and the
that is 2 people today I've run into that didn't know this one. I actually referenced it talking to a fella at a parts today. So basically, it's Aesop's fable. Basically, the idea is that the grasshoppers run around, playing his violin, squeaking his legs or whatever, and he's having a great time. Spring and summer are here. Everything's green and nice. He looks over the ants over there gathering seeds, and he's like, "Yo, ant, why are you using this nice day in such toil?" And the ant's like, "Bro, winter's coming." And the grasshopper's like, I mean, yeah, eventually, but there's plenty of time. And it's like, no, there's really not. And the grasshopper's like, nah, I'm going to enjoy the nice weather. So he hops around and plays his fiddle, and then he runs out of time. Winter comes, and he starves to death because that's the way it goes. Remember, kids, if you don't work hard, you're going to starve to death.
Or... sadly, that is not the... Well... no, it kind of really should be that way.
Anyway. Something in there brought me back to the poem.
Oh, good.
About this... about the fact that this being, he basically, this whole poem stems from walking outside after, a hedonist or, somewhat hedonist good time the night before. There's this party, which it almost seems like there doesn't need to be this fact mentioned as he's discussing this, but I think it was the fiddling of the grasshopper that made me think, about the good time. And it's the morning after the good time, and he's like, oh, there's work to be done. Like, yeah, I can't sit here playing my fiddle. I don't know. It's an interesting detail of the poem that I really kind of overlooked.
I don't.
Yeah, and it's... Oh, go ahead, Nate.
All right. As much as I enjoyed kind of the side of this, like the construction of the poem and the way it's doing things, and kind of what it's getting, I was like, this is well done. I can't, like I said, being from where I'm from, down here in the humid subtropics, I'm like, yeah, I look forward to that first day where I walk outside and I'm like, oh, okay, hold on a minute, hoodie. Like, that's a great day. Like the first time where I'm like, yeah, this would be unpleasant in just a t-shirt. Yay. It's a good time. Now, by the time March comes around and things are still like, cold and mushy, I'm like, okay, I'm ready to sweat again. That first breath of cold, that first sort of shiver, I'm like, yes, we have finally swung out of the, freaking just baleful glare of the summer sun, and we're, escaping his wrath for our short time.
Well, and I feel that way. Go ahead, Sean.
Well, I was gonna say it is also interesting. He never actually, like, he drops like just a couple of tiny hints to what was the night before. There's a glass half full of wine, and there's a lawn overtrodden and strewn from the night before, and he says nothing about what was going on. And that's another one where, like, you have to take that and, work on that a little bit. I was like, oh, like, there was a party, there were a bunch of people having fun here, and then he comes out and he's like, oh, problems are on the horizon. And yeah, it's another subtlety. Subtlety can be fun. Also, sometimes instead of subtlety, just smashing things with a hammer as hard as you can be fun too, in terms of storytelling. But Travis, what were you?
I mean, along with what Nate was saying about, that first cool day, like, I mean, I love autumn. I call it my favorite month. And I like the cold. I like cold northern climes. I mean, I've lived in New Hampshire. I live in Montana. It's just what I'm drawn to. And like I say, I mean, 0 degrees here in Montana, and the part of Montana that I'm in anyhow, it's really not that bad because there's no humidity. And 20 degrees in Pennsylvania is much worse than 20 degrees here in Montana. I mean, I've actually flown from Montana back to Pennsylvania, and I can't get warm. It's the same time of 20-degree temperature.
That's actually one thing it took me a while to notice, because like, okay, everyone knows about like hot and dry heat. Like everyone gets that. Like, everyone knows the saying about Arizona, it's hot, but it's a dry heat. Like everyone knows that. And dry and hot and humid heat. I think fewer people recognize dry and humid cold. And I didn't realize this until I was visiting up north one time, like during the winter, after having been down here a few years. And I'm like, you know what? The thermometer says it's like 37 degrees, but I don't feel any colder right now than I do when it's 50 degrees back down south. And I'm like, what's the difference? I'm like, oh, it's 50 degrees down there, but it's still humid. And like 50 degrees humid feels about like 37 degrees relatively dry. Apparently Montana is drier yet. I'm not familiar.
I mean, like humidity, a humid cold is just armor piercing. You're like, I put on so many layers. I'm still cold because all of my layers are atmospherically damp. I might as well be under naked.
Yeah, if you want to...
No, the layers aren't not as much as you think they would.
So yeah, like 20 degrees Montana is probably about like 38 degrees Pennsylvania is probably about like 50 degrees, down south. And it's it is impressive to see that difference.
Because you're always just, like I said, you're always just like, damn it. I'm not freezing. Like, I'm not just like, oh my God, this is so cold. At the same time, I'm unpleasantly chill no matter what I do.
So here's a question. Do either of you know why the shrubbery is whistling? I don't really feel like I understand that.
It's trying.
The wind is coming through it and knocking the leaves off was my impression. That's why it's doomed.
I could kind of get there, but it just doesn't seem obvious to me. Nate, do you?
Yeah, the shrubbery's trying to act innocent about what it saw last night, so it doesn't chop it down to give me witnesses.
I have no idea. Whistling like public domain Mickey Mouse in Steamboat Willie.
Yeah, my impression was that he looked at this wind coming through the shrubbery and yeah, it was whistling and he's like, yeah, it's doomed. As am I.
Yeah, I could kind of see that, but it wasn't obvious to me. It's just like a whistling shrubbery is a weird thing to me. I guess it's kind of like a talking flaming bush, maybe. It's the opposite of that. That is what it was. That's what Ted Hughes intended. It is the opposite of the talking flaming bush. It is the whistling frozen shrubbery.
Who are we to say?
No, I am putting that is the definitive meaning of that line. I'm putting that down right here.
Well, and there's almost another reference to the wind in the next stanza, couplet, whatever you want to call it. First a skin delicately here, restraining a ripple from the air. So that's suggesting that there is a breeze that should be moving this wine. But, the little thin frost over the wine keeps it from being rippled by the air, the wind. That's my assumption.
It is also interesting because it's like a skin delicately restraining a ripple, and then plate and river on pond and brook, then tons of chain and massive lock. and it like everything is being shut down, being held in place. There's not a way out of this, kind of thing, which is kind of again an interesting kind of image going on there.
Maybe the reason he hates the winter so much is just that it stops him from doing stuff. If you're having this great party and he's like, man, nobody's going to want to do that now. They're going to freeze. It's going to be too cold. My homeboys and homegirls ain't coming over no more. Ain't having no turn up.
See, but here in Montana, when it's cold, that's all the more reason to get together and have a good time and party with the wine.
Your body heat, guys. In Louisiana, I was like, well, the big thing is coming. We might as well have ourselves a hoopla.
Have been to a couple of those, yes.
Yeah, if it ain't like a high class 3 or better, we're probably not evacuating. We probably. Yeah, and I was in tech school when I was back in the Air Force, and like they briefed us that, hey, hurricane season has started, and everyone from like north of, everyone from about north of Shreveport about died. Like I had a whole Yankees in there, like a whole bunch, and they're like, oh my god, oh no, what are we gonna do? I'm like, what do you mean, what are we going to do? They're like, what? Is there going to be a hurricane? I'm like, maybe? Like, what? Maybe? How do you deal with it? I'm like, well, you hope it doesn't hit you. Point your fan at the coast. You point your fan due to the coast, and then you turn it like that, and everybody does it, so maybe you blow the hurricane over to...
See, and
now we're going to have to try and send it further east to Florida.
What
you mean? What do you do? It's a hurricane.
Now, and most areas, or a lot of areas, have a kind of characteristic natural disaster.
Yeah.
And I will say, like, the nice thing about living in a hurricane area is, at least 20th, 21st century, it's coming. You have probably at least a week's warning to get your stuff together and get ready. Either to, if it's a relatively low level one, to just, hunker down in your house for a day or two. If it's a big one, to get the heck out of Dodge. And it's that is a nice advantage to the because like your earthquakes, you have like a few seconds warning. So,
I mean, yeah, it was still just. I mean, that was probably one of the funniest moments I've had is watching a bunch of people look around and dawn on them like, my God, one of the energetic, colossal disasters on Earth does occasionally occur here. And I was like, they're not as bad as you think.
Most of them.
As long as you're not close to the coast. And then I paused for a minute and let everybody remember that we were literally half a mile from a beach. I was like, you'll be okay. At that point, and it's not exactly a tornado. Although those do happen during hurricanes. So, sleep well, kids. From that knew I was pulling everybody's chain, and they were kind of over there smirking. But yeah, I had a good time with them.
I should circle back. 0 degrees is not that bad here, unless the wind is blowing. But that's always the case with cold.
Yeah. That's another thing about winter down here in Louisiana. It's wet. It tends to just drizzle for days. Not even a good, respectable rain. Just rain you can see sucks. But like it'll just drizzle on you for days at a time, so everything's wet and drippy. It's cold, and the wind don't stop blowing. And just some stupid direction or other, the wind is blowing, and just. Oh well. In the summer, the exact opposite problem. It is a billion degrees, still humid, and the wind is dead. Wind does not exist. Like if a housefly farts in your direction, you will perceive that air movement. Like there were fishing, and I do not know why. We were in the marsh on a boat fishing. It was literally 150 degrees. There were no clouds, and the air was so dead. Like usually in the marsh, there's like a bit of air movement. The grass is rustling. It's nice. Ripples on the water. We both sat there and just panted for a couple. There was not a mirror. We're just like, I looked over at Cody and I was like, big bro, we ain't catching. This is not great. He's like, yeah, this is what they mean when they say heat being oppressive, because I feel that. Then we fished for 5 more hours.
Okay.
Thing.
So I think we've covered the poem pretty well tonight. Nate, do you have any last thoughts on the poem you want to throw in?
No, I really thought it was an interesting poem. I liked the little construction tricks he did with it. How, it goes from being a little more, it all sort of like comes down to that point of, very tight rhyme and, talking about a fist of cold gripping the world in the heart. That was really well done, and all of that. It's just that I gotta kind of laugh at the guy for his doomsaying of something that happened a single year. Like you seem very poetic because you are a dramatic little guy.
Yeah, on that front, I think my word would be winter is good. This guy's kind of a wuss.
Well, okay. Now the other thing, though, you said there's a big difference between humid and dry winter, and Ted Hughes was in England, which I understand.
Yeah, but it never really gets cold there. I get it. I understand. It's miserable. But anyhow.
Okay. Well, thank you both for joining us tonight, and God be with you.
And also with you.
Good night.